My name is Mariame Touré. I'm 21 years old. My pronouns are she, her. I consider myself to be an activist. I love giving back to my community, uplifting Black people, specifically Black girls. I also like to think of myself as a creative. I love reading, I love art, I love everything revolving around that. I go to school, I'm a law student, so I'm also interested in social justice and fighting for people's rights. And yeah, I think that's me in a shell.
We invited young members of the community to talk about Black mental health.
I'm Mercedes, she, her. Born and raised in Montreal, Little Burgundy, to be specific, just so we're not saying Montreal. I am 29. I recently went back to school, so that's been a journey. Last year, so I'm in my last semester, hopefully, whether it's online or in person. This year will be my last semester, and then hopefully career change into HR. But for now, it's one day at a time and just trying to get through this as much as possible. Kind of learning about myself as well. This has been also another experience too.
My name's Akira De Carlos, pronouns. So interestingly enough, I say they, them for people who don't know me and white people. And then people who I trust to understand like that gender isn't a binary, then I say she, they. So I'm like, you can use she because I know that you will go back and forth and you won't just use she because that's what you're most comfortable with. But in general, I tell people to say them. I'm like, I don't know you. Or you're like, hey, you're white, I don't trust you. So it's they, them for you. I work as a communications executive at a non-for-profit for food insecurity. But like what I do mostly is a lot of like popular education. So like I do a lot of facilitation, workshops, like consultation for faculties and unions and other non-for-profits.
My name is Fabiola Ngamaleu Teumeni. I am 20 years old and my pronouns are she, her. I am currently a politician. I'm a student. I am a change agent. I work for my community. I dedicate myself to my community because they're the people who help me grow.
My name's Kat. I use she, her pronouns. And 23 years old. Just, yeah, a student, trying to like figure my life out, that sort of thing, so.
I think how well as a community we're able to uplift each other. Like when I think of the people that support me the most in everything I do and that like tell me I'm beautiful every day, it's Black people. They understand me, they know what I've been through, and I feel like they can see when I'm in need of that bit of boost or that little bit of confidence, and they're always there to give it to me.
Just being Black is just one of my favorite things. Existing is just one of my favorite things. But I guess because we're the mold and just trends for everything, just our culture, just who we are, just so diverse, and our hair, from our hair to our bodies to everything, just being a Black person is my favorite thing about being a Black person.
My skin, you know, my culture, the way I can connect with other Black folk is undescribable. You don't need words to be able to relate. You know, you can see a Black person walking down the street and just have that instant, you know, nod or whatever. So just that being is amazing. And, you know, growing up in spaces where I wasn't in contact with that many Black people, I cherish that even more.
Well, it's interesting because like I'm African, so I was born there. I didn't really associate to being Black until I was maybe like 22. I was like, that's an American thing. I don't really know what that is because back home we're all Black, so nobody's saying they're Black. They're just like, oh, are you Angolan? What tribe are you from? But then, I don't know, the longer I lived here, it was like through experience, I was like, at the end of the day, even though we all have different ethnicities and different origins, let's say, like we all experience a lot of the same things, and like our strength and healing comes from the same place. So in that sense, I do identify with being Black, and also just culturally, like our gusto, I guess, it's like everywhere. So whether you're African or Caribbean or, you know, African American, like you still have that essence. So I think that's what being Black is to me.
I really appreciate the richness and culture and, you know, just like the community you can find through, like, obviously there's like struggle and things that are very real for, you know, the Black community, but like also just like the moments of joy that you get and like the deep connections that you can make that, like, I guess like me as a Black person wouldn't achieve with someone who is not Black.
I feel like you can do so many different things for healing, and depending on your experience, your healing will be different. But I think community is probably the most central part of healing to me. I feel like maybe it's in the past 2 years that I was realizing that I was lacking Black community. Like moving here, I think I've only met approximately 5 Angolans, and I've been here for 10 years. So, and I was a few years ago, I was like, I need community. I have really good, woke and sensitive and compassionate, non-Black friends, but it's just not the same thing when you're going through it and things are happening in the world, and you just need people who inherently understand, and you don't necessarily have to speak about it, but you can somehow talk about it without talking and heal without having to bring it up. And I think that's something that I realized I needed and could only find within a Black community. So I think, healing to me is just innate understanding within community members who go through the same thing.
Family, gathering. I think of a tree. I don't know why. A circle, a hug, a long hug. I've been missing that because of the pandemic, but I've been hugging a lot of my friends recently. I hugged you, so
when it comes to healing, I guess it'd be acceptance, courage, confidence, because I feel a lot of the time as a Black person, these are kind of the things that are kind of taken away from us. So kind of reclaiming that and coming to terms with what that means individually, because it doesn't look the same way for everyone. And it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's whether it takes a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, years. It's a journey, and I think it's one that we come out better for it at the end, and we can look back and still accept the good and the bad. Even that, I think, just the neighborhoods where we grew up, where you had a Black community, a lot of the time I just feel that it gets overlooked, or it's kind of meshed into just one big neighborhood. And I just feel like it's just important to kind of shout out where you're from, because it is part of your identity. And also it's this idea of going home too. It's just that is where you go back sometimes to find your peace, or for example, I go back to find my peace when I need to kind of reconnect with family or friends that are still there. So just specifically Little Burgundy, because it also played a huge part in who I am today. So I can't just negate that part of my being.
I feel as though we as Black folk have had and are still having tumultuous times and tumultuous feelings. So when we can encounter peace, being at peace with ourselves, being at peace with the people around us, with the anger that we have, with the tears and all the emotions, that's healing. That's true. Yeah.
Healing is such a tough process, especially when you're Black, because there's just so much outside noise and so much, I guess, violence and hurt that you have to wade through in order to find that healing. And you can, I guess, often get lost in the negative stuff, and it doesn't really bring you peace and healing in a way. So I think right now I'm really trying to figure out how to be cognizant of the Black experience, my own unique experience, and also the experiences that intersect with being a Black man, being a Black trans person, being a Black non-binary person, that sort of thing. And really, wade through that kind of stuff in order to find my own healing. that's like going to serve me in a way.
No, and I feel like that might be something that's missing in my life. Because I don't know, everything is so fast paced in like what I do that I'm like, I just need to go through the motions and get through it and then I'll be okay. But it's like to actually take the time and go consult someone and speak to them, even if you don't think anything's going on, something's probably going on. I don't know, I just haven't, not that I haven't had the time, I just haven't made it a priority, and I probably should.
Yes, I have, pretty much all through my life. So starting since I was maybe like 10 years old, I think earlier. I first started with a social worker, I think, and then I had a psychologist, and then after that, from like age 13 up, it was mostly counselors. So
Yes, seen many. And I have an amazing therapist now, and it took a long time for me to get there, but yeah, it was that too. At one point I was like, okay, I need a therapist who looks like me, who has some intersections with my identity, primarily being Black, because like white therapists just don't get it. You know, like half of my exhaustion, half of my anxiety or depression is about being Black. Yeah. And if I have to say that word for word, then we're gonna have an issue, you know? And I'm also not in therapy to like receive sympathy, you know? So that just like dynamic doesn't help. And yeah, so it was a journey, but yeah, I do have a therapist now who is Black, and it's a great time. Before her, I had a therapist who wasn't white, but she wasn't Black. And like, that's when I realized like, oh no, I really need a Black therapist. Like I can't have like a, you know, a brown South Asian therapist, because it's not the same experiences. Like the discrimination they face or like the life experience that they have are not the same thing. And I could tell, because like I would just be like, oh man, I'm just exhausted from everything that I've had to like overcome in order to get where I am today, you know? And they had like no understanding of that. And I was like, oh God. And like, for example, like when I first met them, I was like, my priority is to get a diagnosis so I could register with the Accessibility Center, because like it's just really hard to do school. And it took them like maybe 6 sessions to let me know that to do that diagnosis was going to cost an extra $250. And I was just like, how did it not make sense to you to let me know this at the very beginning when I first started therapy with you? Like, where was your whole like, oh, what about their, you know, their finances? Like, do they have enough money to afford this? And if this is a priority, like maybe I should let them know. And, you know, so I was really shook by that, because I was like, you should know the barriers I face. So for you to bring up a week before the session to make the diagnosis that it's going to cost me an extra $250 is just like kind of an inkling to how much you're unaware of like all the different things that a Black person faces, you know? So that was when I was like, okay, well, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to get my diagnosis registered, then I'm going to not see you again. So that was that. And then the therapist I had before her, who was pretty good to a certain extent, but then one session they started crying with me. Yeah, they were just like, start crying. And I was like, I know I've been through a lot. I know, this is why I'm here. You don't need to cry. Like, I don't need to be passing you a tissue box. So yeah, and it's just like, I think also if somebody has been through the same things as you and identifies the same way as you, they have the strength to deal with your issues. Whereas in, I don't know, my white therapists, they were just like confronted with a lot of things when I was telling them these things. So I think it was a lot for them, and probably their internalized white guilt as well. And I was like, okay, no. Yeah, exactly. Oh, no. Yeah. So yeah, I think mainly the barriers was just kind of like finding a therapist that could truly work with me, and who had the patience to, you know, go through all of my like history in order to start therapy. I feel like a lot of therapists were like, okay, we're going to do behavioral therapy cognitive behavioral therapy, and it was just kind of like action based of like, we're going to move forward. And I'm like, but what about the rest? Like, first to move forward, you need to know every single thing about me. And like, you know, right now I'm 26. I'm like, there's a lot of history. So I don't know how you're going to find like ways to solve this without really understanding who I am. And so that also made me feel like, oh, maybe you don't think all of these deep-seated issues and all these microaggressions or experiences that I've had in the world aren't as important. Like, you're just focused on the healing, but you can't heal without closing the past, you know?
Starting last year, actually. Because mental health is something, for me personally, I never kind of dealt with until later on in my life. And it's not until I was kind of exposed to, yes, you know, it's okay to go and say, I mean, yes, there are avenues or resources available to you to be able to kind of get through your feelings or process your feelings. And just for the way I grew up, it's not really something we discussed at home. Yes, if you're feeling upset, it's kind of just like, okay, like, here you go and move on. It wasn't necessarily, well, like, you're feeling this way for a reason. Let's kind of explore that and unpack that. And I'm just the type of person to be like, okay, bottle up and let's move on, because that's just what I was used to and what I grew up with. But the more I learned about it, the more I kind of educated myself about it. You're kind of like, well, maybe it's something worth investing in. And little by little, you know, I started to see the results of being able to seek out mental health professionals. The only problem is that it was a white mental health professional. So it's to say, yes, I have access to one, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm comfortable always going to them. I will do it because I don't have a choice. I will do it because I don't necessarily know where else I can go to find like mental health professionals that are people of color, women of color, Black women specifically. But it's only as I was kind of doing my research where I was kind of coming up with like coming across like Facebook pages or groups where they had these kind of things. But it was strange for me because it's not something that I had ever, like I said, been exposed to, but also I was kind of fearful of doing it because also there's kind of the stigma of like always having to be the strong Black woman like 24/7, and we're just kind of supposed to push through. But at some point you reach your breaking point and you kind of look back and you're just like, well, what now? Like, who's there for me when I need to like break down and cry or rant until 3:00 in the morning? There's not really any options for me to do that and to do it wholeheartedly, like with my chest. Because at some point it does require a level of vulnerability, and just being vulnerable is something I'm just generally uncomfortable with. And it's been kind of hard to unlearn those practices as well, because you kind of see your mother do it and your grandmother do it and your father do it and everybody else around you kind of do it. And unless like you're in those circles where you can discuss it openly, and like that's why I appreciated Spitfire, because that was my avenue. And over the year, with the practices that I've kind of learned, that's where I started to really get into self-care, not necessarily like, you know, basic, like just, you know, spa days or whatever, what the home care spa days, but really sitting there and be like, okay, I need to meditate. I need to kind of check out. It's okay to say no. And that's just been my favorite word between 2020 and 2021. Just the use of no. I don't need to do everything. I don't need to offer my time to people I don't necessarily want to give my time to. That is all part of healing. That's all part of, you know, taking care of myself. And it's been wild. Like, I'm not going to lie. It was an experience and a half, but it was only recent. And again, it's not necessarily from someone who relates to me. Well, one is in terms of, I would say, like, let's say justifiable anger. I would say also in terms of just being able to like afford it. Like, is it a certain, Is it afforded to a certain level of like financial stability? Is it for certain people who can have the education to be able to know about, like, do I have to have something or something diagnosed to be able to seek out like a mental health specialist? And it's kind of just like, well, I don't necessarily check those boxes, so maybe not, because they do ask you to kind of fill in forms. And what happens if what I'm feeling doesn't necessarily equate to what is on the form or standard or whatever it may be, criteria they're looking for. So, and just the idea of what does mental health look like as well. If I don't think I look, does that mean that I don't have a right to do it? Or can I say certain things or express certain things and I'm going to be told, well, it doesn't really apply to you? Like, for example, other microaggressions I may experience. Things like that. And I think those are the major ones.
I feel like maybe my family wouldn't 100% understand why. My mom, yes, because my mom's a nurse. She's gone through her own hardships in life, and I feel like she's always been very conscious of our mental health, of like her children and what we're going through on the mental side, not just like physically. More on like my dad's and my brothers, I'm not sure if they'd really understand it. They might laugh at me. So if I were to consult someone, I'm not sure if I would disclose it to my whole entire family, because it'd be something for me, like that I'm doing for myself, not for everyone. I think that maybe that you have to go looking for it more than what you'd want. Like, I don't know, if it was like, sure, at school, like they have like this whole program that they offer for the students, but I don't think I'd necessarily go, not because it's not catered to Black people specifically. I mean, maybe that's part of it, but it's just, I don't even feel like many students actually go. So I don't know in what ways it helps us. And then it's not necessarily, something that I know that's offered in the circles that I'm part of. So I'd have to go looking for it. And like, I know that there's plenty of Black mental health specialists. And like, I know like recently in the last year, people have been really good with sharing resources about that. But again, it's making it a priority, like looking for it. And then also when I think of the cost, I don't know if it's always free or not. So then I'm like, well, what am I going to spend my money on? Is it going to be on that, or is it going to be on stuff for school or like activities I want to do that make me feel good? So I think it's those few things.
The barriers, I think there's just not enough Black mental health professionals to go to. But there's also the most prevalent barrier, I feel like, is like financial. And just because therapy is such it comes out of academia, so it's just like it's expensive, and it's like there's so much work and money that goes into just becoming a therapist. So it's like of course it's so expensive. But yeah, I wish we could, I guess, like have mental health services that were accessible financially, but like also not a burden, or not so much a burden, and it would be a healthy environment for the people who were administering mental health services. Because I feel like, once you can't just, make it affordable and then not, also meet the health professionals halfway and, realize that, okay, you're not like, you can't just like not give us enough money and just expect us to be here. So
I hope they're able to heal, and I hope it gives them motivation for the future and like encourages them to like go after their healing. I think a really big problem within the Black community is that like healing isn't emphasized enough. It's kind of, or it is, but in a very performative way, like self-care. And it's like, no, you need to go to therapy. You need to see a doctor. Like, you need to take care of your health. So yeah, kind of just breaking down those barriers and like taking away the stigma around like healing and seeking help, and that it's okay, and that like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes also we like downplay the effects that living in a predominantly white society has on us. And I don't think there's any, there's any negative connotation to like being real about the effects that living in like a white Western society has on Black folk. And I think the more that we talk about that, the more we confront that, the more we admit that it affects us a lot, the easier it is to have conversations about healing and to move forward with that, and not to be uncomfortable talking about that, and not to be uncomfortable seeking out that help.
Black healing is power.
Black healing is empowering. Yeah, it's necessary. It's essential. It's vital. Yeah.
Black healing is love. I love it. Yeah, absolutely.
Black healing is Black joy, I think. I think once you can find joy in being Black, you can find joy in being around other Black people, being connected to your community, whatever that is, because Black is all-encompassing, so many cultures, so many different identities, that sort of thing. So once you can find that, just like being happy around people, that's really what I think Black healing is.
I think it's a process. Like, I don't know, you go through a lot of trauma when you're a kid, especially a Black kid or from other minority groups, and you carry a lot in your heart over the years. But I think in these past few years, I've been more conscious of what I've been through, and it's like now I'm starting to fight back and like take back my power. So it's like a process, and like in 10, 20 years, I'll definitely be at a different place. And I feel like as time goes, my heart is gonna get lighter and lighter. And when I was younger, no. I think it's more recently when I've been older, my mom's been more open about talking about what she went through when she first came to Canada, and like getting married young and then having kids. And it wasn't as easy as it seemed. So then like she told us that, yeah, like at some point, like she felt like she was depressed. So she did consult a mental health specialist. I think that's what it's called. Yeah. So, I mean, she's done it. So yeah, but that's the only real connection I have to that.
No, not really. I am Cameroonian, proudly. In Cameroonian culture and African culture, it's not really discussed. Mental health is seen as, like a sign of weakness, when we discuss it, when we express it. And so in my household, we didn't really talk about how we were feeling. It was more through actions. Oh, if you're doing this, then you must be fine. But that's not exactly the truth. But in recent years, we've all started to share a lot more. My dad just started therapy for the first time. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm so proud of him. He's embarking in that journey for himself. And I think that that's going to help him heal a lot with his relationship to his mother and his father, his siblings. And so that's really, really amazing, yeah.
On a daily basis, no, but it is a more open conversation. Like I have a lot of friends who go to therapy, and they tell me about their experience, and I'm like, I would want to do that. But yeah, and I think my friends are a lot more conscious of like how each of us is doing. Like, when someone's having a bad day, so it's like we feel more open and comfortable to talk about it, whereas like in other contexts, maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable bringing up that like you're not okay, that you're having a bad day, that you've been feeling depressed. So I think it would be offered in all the community centers that we have. Like let's say we're part of the West Island Black Community Association, and they've done activities in the past, I think, related to mental health. But it's been like, I think maybe a workshop or an activity. It's not something that stays throughout the year. So like if we're able to get funding, let's say to have a mental health specialist on call, just like we have lawyers on call to give legal clinics, well, that'd be amazing, because then I'm always at WIPCA. So if someone was already there and I could just stop in, and if it's free, like that'd just be amazing. So just having it in spaces where people actually are. So whether that be in school or like in community centers, and then finding a way to make it more like, to make people see that they actually need it. Like you don't need to be at the bottom of like the barrel to go and consult a mental health specialist. It could just be like something's on your mind, maybe you're having a fight with a friend and you need to talk to someone, and someone will be there for that. I think it'll be just that for me, another like sense of community, another place where I can gather with fellow Black people and share my experience and be welcomed and be completely me without any shame or without fear of judgment. And I'm really hoping it can get me to like touch that side of mental health, which I haven't really been able to in my past experiences.